The spring of 2005 was an exciting time for Jennifer Wilbanks and John Mason, both 32. The couple was engaged to be married and living together in what had previously been just John's home in Duluth, Georgia. While they lived together, they maintained that they were waiting until they were married to consummate their relationship in accordance with their strong Christian beliefs. Their wedding was quickly approaching. The couple had gotten engaged in August of 2004, just 10 months after they went on their first date, and they planned their wedding for just 6 months after the proposal. The relatively short engagement did not mean that they would have a small wedding, however. They invited 600 guests and were having a total of 28 bridesmaids and groomsmen. Jennifer had selected Lenox china, Wallace silverware, and Waterford crystal for her wedding registry, which included more than $20,000 worth of items for her guests to select wedding gifts from. 8 separate bridal showers were thrown for Jennifer by various groups of friends and family members, and members of both families were helping with the details of the wedding day. Jennifer's final bridal shower was held on April 24th, just under a week before her wedding day, April 30th, 2005. On April 26th, around 8:30 p.m., Jennifer left home, telling John she was going for a 5-mile run through their neighborhood. She was an avid runner who ran almost every day, so this was not out of the ordinary. It was out of the ordinary, however, for her not to complete her run by 10:15. Around that time, John became concerned that Jennifer was still not home. John worried that something had happened to Jennifer, initially thinking that perhaps she had gotten hurt while running, or perhaps someone had beaten her up and left her in a ditch somewhere. He drove all over town looking for Jennifer, but when he failed to find her after a few hours, he called police. By dawn, John and Jennifer's house was full of police officers and family members, and by noon, hundreds of people had come to help search for Jennifer. A flyer was quickly created and printed, and volunteers left to distribute copies of it. The story of the missing bride-to-be quickly made headlines across the country. Multiple law enforcement agencies became involved in the search for Jennifer, in part because of the extreme amount of public pressure generated by the extensive media coverage. John Mason, as both Jennifer's fiancé and the last person to see her before she vanished, was almost immediately considered a person of interest in her disappearance. 3 computers were taken from John and Jennifer's home by police, and John was questioned by the FBI. Authorities asked him to take a polygraph test, which he said he would only do under conditions set by his attorney, and he instead underwent a privately administered polygraph. He allegedly passed the test and turned the results over to police. Jennifer's parents were completely distraught over her disappearance. The Wilbanks family offered a $100,000 reward for information that brought Jennifer home. Jennifer's loved ones maintained that she could not have voluntarily disappeared because she was nothing but excited for her upcoming wedding. In addition, her credit cards, identification, keys, and expensive engagement ring had all been found inside her house. Hundreds of people volunteered to help with the official search for Jennifer, and local businesses donated food and drinks for them. The town was completely consumed by the search for Jennifer, between locals and law enforcement searching for her, and national media outlets descending upon the town to cover the case. Because so many people were involved in the search, the city of Duluth and its surrounding areas were thoroughly searched very quickly. No solid leads were developed in the days following Jennifer's disappearance. A few items of clothing were found and sent for testing, but none of them were believed to have belonged to Jennifer. A clump of cut hair was found in an office complex and also submitted to the lab. With nowhere else to look, authorities called off the search for Jennifer on Friday, April 29th, saying that they had turned over probably every leaf in the city. Jennifer and John's wedding was supposed to take place the following day. Instead of gathering to celebrate their marriage that day, Jennifer's friends and family planned to hold a vigil and prayer service at the church where the wedding was supposed to take place. April 30th would turn out to be a very eventful day, even though it did not feature a wedding as planned. Just a few hours after midnight, on what was supposed to be the day she got married, Jennifer Wilbanks called the home she shared with her fiancé, John. Her stepfather, who was still at the home following the search, answered the phone. He told his stepdaughter how relieved he was to hear her voice and began detailing all of the local support and national interest from people who wanted to help find her. Jennifer asked to speak with John, and with police listening in on the call, she told him that she did not know where she was. She further told him that she had been abducted by a man and a woman in Georgia while she was out on her run on April 26th. At her stepfather's instruction, Jennifer hung up the phone and called 911 so that police could come find her. Jennifer had been calling from a payphone outside of a 7-Eleven in Albuquerque, New Mexico. A panicked and confused Jennifer told the 911 operator that she had been abducted by a Hispanic man with bad teeth and a blonde, heavy-set Caucasian woman driving a blue van while she was out jogging. Local police picked her up and brought her back to the police station, where she was questioned. In Georgia, Jennifer's family and her fiancé were ecstatic that she had been found safe. However, their joy would turn to shock after just 6 hours of celebrating Jennifer being found alive. Jennifer was able to provide a very detailed narrative of what had happened to her. She told police that she had been raped by the man who had abducted her and then been forced to perform sexual acts on his female accomplice. She was able to provide very specific details about how they had tied her up with rope, where she had been lying on the floor of the van after she was taken, what she could see out of the van's windows, and what Spanish music had been playing on the radio. She said that her captors had cut off her hair before letting her go in Albuquerque. Jennifer repeated her story multiple times over the course of the next few hours. However, there were inconsistencies between her various accounts of what had happened to her. Eventually, during an interview with the FBI, one of the agents asked her, "Do we need to look for the blue van anymore?" Jennifer told them no. She had made up the entire story about being abducted and raped. Jennifer had actually left home on her own accord. She maintained that her leaving had nothing to do with her feelings for John or anything he had done, but was rather the result of her own inability to handle the stress of her upcoming marriage. She initially claimed that she had made a last-minute decision to flee the pressures of finishing up all of the final details for her wedding. However, that would also turn out to be a lie. Jennifer had actually purchased the Greyhound bus ticket she used to leave Georgia on April 19th, a week before her disappearance. She left on the 26th because it was the last day the ticket was valid. She took $40 in cash out of an ATM earlier that day, which gave her a total of $150 in cash for her to travel with. She had left home that night with a pair of scissors. She had cut her hair short so that she would be less likely to be recognized. Jennifer got into a cab at her local public library near her home in Duluth, and it took her to the Greyhound terminal near the Atlanta airport. There, she boarded a bus to Austin, Texas. The man and the woman she would later claim abducted her were modeled after two other passengers she met on this bus. She did not want to be alone in Austin after dark, however, so she decided to change buses in Dallas so that she could spend the night on a bus that was going to Las Vegas. There, she spent the last of her money on a ticket to Albuquerque. When she arrived there, she wandered around the city for several hours before picking up the payphone outside of the 7-Eleven and calling home. She wore the same clothes throughout her days-long travels, surviving mainly on candy bars and snacks that she had left home with. Jennifer's stepfather and uncle had traveled to New Mexico as soon as Jennifer was located there in the early morning hours of April 30th. Authorities did not wish to hold Jennifer after her hours of questioning, so she traveled back to Georgia with her relatives that same day, flying in first class thanks to a ticket purchased by her stepfather. She wore an FBI hat she had been given by agents and carried a teddy bear that was a gift from airport police that she named Al in honor of Albuquerque. Because of the nationwide attention Jennifer's case had garnered, members of the media swarmed the Atlanta airport, hoping to get footage of Jennifer as she arrived. She was escorted off the plane on the tarmac to avoid the cameras in the terminal, but she was photographed as she left the airport, with a blanket covering her head so that her face would not be visible in any of the photos. Once it was announced that Jennifer had left Georgia voluntarily and concocted the abduction story, public perception of her changed dramatically. Opinions of her were somewhat varied, but overwhelmingly negative. Jennifer, now known as the runaway bride, became the subject of jokes all across the United States and was ridiculed on late-night talk shows. Some people did not think she had done anything wrong necessarily, but were bothered by the fact that Jennifer had put her family through such an ordeal. Shirley Fanning Lassiter, the mayor of Duluth, said in a statement, "We're absolutely delighted that this young woman is alive and has not been hurt, and the worst has not happened. But everyone is very emotional and has many different emotions about the deceptions and the untruths. And just the thought of her mother and what her mother has gone through these last 3 days makes me want to cry." Jennifer's hoax did inspire a great deal of anger as well. Hispanic community groups were upset with her for fabricating a Hispanic abductor because she was playing on and promoting negative stereotypes about their community. Volunteers and donors felt betrayed and were upset that their time and money had gone to a woman who not only did not need their help, but lied about being abducted after she could not stay on the run any longer. Ryan Kelly, who owned a cafe near Jennifer and John's house and provided coffee and sandwiches to searchers, expressed relief that Jennifer was all right, but told NBC News, "But that being said, this is one of the most selfish and self-centered acts I've ever seen. We saw her parents, and you could see the anguish in their eyes. It was terrible. I don't care where you are. Unless you're in the Amazon rainforest, you'd know everybody was out looking for you." Public outrage increased a few weeks later when it became public that the rights to Jennifer's story had been sold for $500,000. Victims' advocacy groups were angry because of all the needless attention Jennifer's case had received when there were cases of people who were missing because they had actually been abducted or hurt, who could have benefited from the media coverage instead. Police in Duluth received phone calls from all over the country, advocating for Jennifer to be charged with filing a false police report. Jennifer's friends and family, however, were not upset with her, at least when they were in public. In their public statements, they focused on the fact that Jennifer's disappearance had come to the best possible resolution, with her returning home safely. Her fiancé, John Mason, told Fox News 2 days after Jennifer returned home in his first public interview, "Just because we haven't walked down the aisle, just because we haven't stood in front of 500 people and said our I do's, my commitment before God to her was the day I bought that ring and put it on her finger, and I'm not backing down from that." After returning to Georgia, Jennifer released a public statement. In it, she thanked everyone who helped look for her and supported her family, saying that she hoped their experience with her did not discourage them from helping others in the future. She maintained that she was excited to marry John, and the timing of her leaving did not mean that she wanted to call off the wedding. The statement read, in part, "At this time, I cannot explain fully what happened to me last week. I had a host of compelling issues which seemed out of control, issues for which I was unable to address or confine. In my mind, it was never about the timing, however unfortunate. I was simply running from myself and from certain fears controlling my life. Each day I am understanding more about who I am and the issues that influenced me to respond inappropriately. Therefore, I have started professional treatment voluntarily." She also asked for forgiveness of my family, our friends, our respective churches, our communities, and any others I may have offended unintentionally. Jennifer did voluntarily enter an inpatient treatment facility for what she described in another statement as physical and mental issues. The name of the facility and the type of treatment she received were not made public. Jennifer's decision to enter treatment was not entirely surprising given her past. Jennifer did have a criminal record, and by her own later admission, her crimes had been cries for help. Between 1996 and 1998, she had been arrested 3 times in Hall County, Georgia. In 1996, she was arrested for misdemeanor shoplifting. She allegedly stole $37.05 worth of merchandise from a Gainesville Walmart. The case was dismissed after Jennifer completed Project Turnabout, a 6-week counseling program for shoplifters. A few months later, she was then charged with a felony for allegedly stealing $1,740 worth of merchandise from a Gainesville mall. Jennifer would later say in an interview with Katie Couric that she had actually allowed her friends to take merchandise from a store where she worked. She also claimed that she had turned herself in. The felony charge was dropped after Jennifer completed a pre-trial diversion program. She pled guilty to a lesser charge, paid restitution, and performed 75 hours of community service. Jennifer was arrested for the 3rd time in April of 1998, again for shoplifting. She took $98 worth of merchandise from another store. She spent 2 weekends in jail, paid a $400 fine, and performed 50 hours of community service. Jennifer would later describe herself as a perfectionist and claim that she had engaged in these impulsive and criminal activities rather than deal with the anxieties that plagued her. While her previous crimes do not normally escalate into fabricating a disappearance and lying to police about being kidnapped and raped, Jennifer's previous criminal history does show that she had known issues with impulse control and decision-making when she was stressed. The incident that made her infamous in 2005 wasn't necessarily predictable, but in retrospect, given the fact that she had not sought treatment for her mental health issues beyond what was mandated by the courts, her running away from home and lying to police during a period of extreme stress does fit into a larger pattern of behavior. The matter of whether or not Jennifer could or would be charged with any crimes was not immediately resolved. The Albuquerque Police Department had the strongest claim for jurisdiction in the case, as Jennifer had made her most detailed statements about her supposed abduction and rape in Albuquerque to them. They therefore could charge her with filing a false police report. However, authorities in Albuquerque, who had only briefly been involved in the case and by all accounts had befriended Jennifer during her time with them, did not immediately file charges against Jennifer for lying to them. The Albuquerque Police Department did receive several angry phone calls from local residents demanding her arrest, but they maintained that they would use their own discretion in deciding whether or not to charge her, even though she had admitted to breaking the law by providing them with a false official statement. Ultimately, no charges were ever filed against Jennifer in New Mexico. However, authorities in Georgia, who had spent days and thousands of dollars looking for Jennifer, were interested in pressing charges against her, although they did not do so immediately upon her return to the state. Duluth Police Chief Randy Belcher said at the time that they were still weighing their legal options. Jennifer had told Chief Belcher the fake story about being kidnapped and raped over the phone from Albuquerque, which did give them jurisdiction to charge her as well. On May 25, 2005, Jennifer was indicted on 2 charges by a grand jury in Gwinnett County, Georgia. She was charged with 1 count of making false statements, a felony punishable by up to 5 years in prison, and 1 count of making a false report of a crime, a misdemeanor punishable by up to a year in jail. At the time, authorities were also negotiating with Jennifer and her lawyers about repayment for the costs incurred searching for her. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation, the State Department of Natural Resources, and 2 neighboring counties opted to not attempt to recover the money they spent assisting in the search. Jennifer eventually pled no contest to the felony charge of making a false statement and was sentenced to 2 years of probation, 120 hours of community service, and ongoing mental health counseling. Jennifer completed her community service through tasks such as mowing the lawns of public buildings, cleaning offices in the probation division, and washing public vehicles. The judge also ordered her to pay $2,550 in restitution to the sheriff's office to cover some of the costs they incurred searching for her. Jennifer had also already agreed to pay $13,250 to the city of Duluth to help cover the cost of the overtime the city had paid police officers during the search. In total, the city had spent over $43,000 on the search for Jennifer. Jennifer and John initially postponed their wedding, but it was ultimately canceled after their relationship ended. The couple broke up around May of 2006, approximately a year after Jennifer ran away before their initial wedding date. However, while their romantic relationship was over, legal proceedings kept them in each other's lives for the rest of the year. After Jennifer returned from Albuquerque and checked into a treatment facility, she had signed over power of attorney to John so that he could negotiate the sale of the rights to her story. He did so to a publisher in New York for $500,000. He then used that money to purchase a new house. He purchased the house in his name alone. Jennifer lived there with him for several months, but he evicted her after they broke up. In September of 2006, Jennifer sued her former fiancé for $250,000 for her share of the money he had received for the rights to her story, and an additional $250,000 in punitive damages. She also sought to get back some personal items that were still in the house, including wedding gifts that the couple had received. John then filed a countersuit, claiming that he had not stolen the money from the media deal and arguing that he should receive money from Jennifer because of the emotional distress he experienced when she ran away from their home. Jennifer and John both dropped their lawsuits in January of 2007. Jennifer and John each did eventually get married, just not to each other. John got married in a backyard ceremony officiated by his father in 2008. In 2010, Jennifer married Greg Hudson, the owner of a landscaping company. The couple lived in Gainesville, Georgia, where Jennifer got a job with a telecommunications staffing agency in 2015. She eventually became a director of human resources there. Greg filed for an uncontested divorce in March of 2021, and it was finalized the following month. The case of the runaway bride is generally remembered as being a pop culture scandal, known for the headlines and the punchlines it inspired. However, it is a case worth remembering for more than just the jokes and the controversy. It highlights just how many problems can arise from faking crimes and lying to police. It also shows how important the availability of mental health treatment and the willingness of individuals to undergo it are in preventing personal problems from growing into issues that affect entire families and communities.